Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm so glad to be back to our AIM group. And you'll probably see the bio that is shared by Nikhil. Just be a bit of an intro to start with. A lot of my batchmates know me since I'm in AIM, but you probably don't know me after the AIM, right? So after the AIM, I joined Bayer Pharmaceutical through our campus recruitment. So I stayed in Bayer Healthcare for like 8 years. And then in the year of 2001, I actually joined the logistic industry, starting from TNT, then Zurich Pharma, and then FedEx. So I'm a kind of a combi between the healthcare and logistic, right? So healthcare logistic is always something I'm focusing on, and in the past 20 years, it's a field that I'm quite passionate about. So today, I'm really happy to use this opportunity to just share with you all my thoughts on this sector, and particularly we're in the COVID situation. You see a lot of masks and ventilators are flying around in the world, but probably you don't know behind all of this is a healthcare supply chain guys and is moving all the cargoes around the world. So this sharing today will basically give you a little bit overview on what exactly the healthcare supply chain is all about, what is really unique about it, and what is really the key trend that is driving this supply chain, and how this COVID really impact us, right? So I think this is really what I'm going to share today. Okay, let me, how come my slides doesn't move? Okay, this is actually the first slide. There are some key trends which I want to highlight with you. I think if you look at the transportation logistics space, I always want to tell the story to my clients, to my colleagues. This is the most recession-proof industry sector within the logistics. Why I say that? Fundamentally, what really driving the healthcare is really the aging population that is, fast aging. When people get older, they need healthcare. So in Shanghai, in the China, the country that I'm very familiar, the 60 years old and above, is already making like 18, 17%. In Shanghai, it's like a 20% population is about 65 years old and above, right? So once people get old, the need for healthcare, for medical instruments, for pharmaceutical product, it's going to be there. So that's why even in this COVID situation where a lot of factories shut down, a lot of the automotive, the sales of automotive industry is died by 40%. But a lot of my healthcare clients, they are growing 30, 40%, right? We're actually flying air flights just to move for one company, just to charter the whole airplane to move the testing kits. So this group of people are growing really well right now, right? So there's also very important few things really defines the healthcare industry. One thing defines it is really the innovation in the therapies. Previously, we all know the tablets. Yeah, we get a flu and cold, we take a tablet, right? These are all the chemical compound, traditional pharmaceutical product. The innovation in the therapy basically means nowadays you see a lot of the therapy is not chemical based. It's actually the biological, the protein based, the gene based therapy, right? So this type of the simplest example is the insulin, right? So that diabetic patients, when they get into the advanced stage, they inject the insulin. So the insulin is actually a protein based product. So because of this drive from chemical to biological based product, the needs for the supply chain, it's become a lot of a temperature protection because this type of substance only thrive in a certain type of temperature. So the whole transportation, logistic, warehouse, you need to be either 2 to 8 degrees Celsius or 15 to 25 throughout the entire chain. It's, I mean, the food industry, seafood industry need temperature protection also, but the third point really defines it from away from the food industry. I mean, this is a highly, highly regulated industry, be it the type of packaging you use or type of a process you build, you need to be validated, you need to be certified, and it's quite stringent. So be highly regulated and temperature sensitive. It is really the hallmark of a healthcare supply chain in the industry. I think nowadays with the COVID situation kicking in, telehealth is really kicking off, right? So a lot of distance diagnosis, you actually, patient talk to the doctors remotely. And this really drives the home care part, the direct to home delivery of a lot of healthcare services is also on the rise. In fact, in China, the Alibaba is using the e-commerce to do the healthcare, to do the drug distribution. It's already crossed, they're growing like 40, 50% every year. And now it's almost $1 billion right now in terms of the revenue. It's just grown in the past 2 or 3 years from very small base into billion, yeah. So these are the few key things I feel is really defining the healthcare supply chain. Let me turn on to the next page. So what does it really mean? I think healthcare supply chain, there are a few distinct market segments, right? It's follow the value chain of the pharma industry. So pharma industry, they started with R&D. They have to research on the drug, right? And then once the drug is sort of approved, they have to do the production of the drug, right? And then once the production finished, they have to distribute the product in the, into the market. So supply chain follows these value chains. In R&D, you hear a lot of clinical trials. Basically, they are trying out this drug on the real patients. And then logistic-wise, we have a clinical trial logistics, right? So when they come to the production part, they move a lot of raw materials. We call it API, stands for active pharma ingredients. So it's actually the lot of pharma ingredients is procured from suppliers, moved to the factory, and among the factories to another factories. So these are all the API, active pharma ingredients supply chain, is another standalone supply chain segment. And then the commercial distribution, this is where they're actually doing the wholesalers, so wholesalers sell to the pharmacies, and pharmacies, you know, patients buy from pharmacies. That's a whole commercial distribution within the market. So this is largely speaking the 3 key segments in the healthcare supply chain, and each 3 of segments are actually quite different, right? So in clinical trial supply chain, I think the right-hand side, this picture, basically what we move under the clinical blood samples, urine samples. You probably hear nowadays with the COVID, you hear they are doing clinical trials on vaccines, on the treatment. Behind it, there's a lot of logistics involved. Basically, we actually, as a logistic guy, we move 2 types of things. One is we actually move a lot of test medications, right? This type of medication, be it a COVID vaccine or COVID treatment, these medicines needs to be sent to all the hospitals for testing. And we also procure a lot of comparative medicines. So we want to test medicine A, they probably procure medicine B and C, and we actually package it into the small package, blended, so we don't know, patient don't know which one is taking what, and then we send it to all the hospitals. Once this test medicine goes out, and then the patient take it, They withdraw the blood, put it into the vials like this, and send it back to the laboratory. So we orchestrate the entire flow, medicines out, the blood sample coming in, and then we send the blood sample to the central laboratory for testing. So the testing report submit to FDA for drug registration or approval. So that's kind of a clinical trial logistic. And this is actually a very specialized area. And number one, the blood samples, especially if we're talking of COVID, yeah, this is actually a highly infectious. You can't move anyhow into an envelope or something just moves, right? So typically, there's a global regulations governs the movement of this type of blood samples. The type of logo I put it there is typically each logo, you have a dry ice logo called a 9, you have a biological substance, you have the UN coding. Each logo correlates to a different type of handling requirement. And the packaging itself is typically 3-layer packaging. It's all very regulated, right? This part is actually quite special, but let me share with you, in the COVID situation, like when initially they discovered this infection cases in China, they are not so sure what exactly causing the infection. They actually withdraw the blood from the patient and send it to a laboratory for testing. You know how they do it? It is actually in the press, They actually put these vials into a plastic envelope, something like that, the pouch that I put it there. And then they put a metal container and have somebody hand carry it by taking a train, hand carry this into a lab in Beijing to test it. This is really in the press. By these regulations, it's actually totally wrong. They really need to use that in packaging. They really need to affix the label and to do the formal proper clearance. Basically declare this shipment, go through a separate screening channel just to avoid any leakage and things like any risk of leakage. And I think in APAC, this business is actually a very big business. And behind all of this drug testing, vaccine testing, it's the logistic guys orchestrate the supply of drug, all the packaging material, bring the whole sample back. It's a huge business and it's very, very niche, right? Now I move on to the second segment, the production flow. This is where you see we move drums like that because this is really the chemical compound. But upcomingly, we move a lot of biological compound as well. This part is actually, again, follow the very different logic because it's a part of the pharmaceutical production. It is they follow a different set of a quality standard. They call the GMP, good manufacturing practice. So as a part of the good manufacturing process, they have a few principles. Principle number one, validation, validation, validation. They validate everything from a new machine to new packaging material. Even for the logistic guy, if I say I want to move this drum from India to Netherlands, okay, validation process coming in. I need to send out a few trial shipment, try out the different type of packaging, different type of routing, and then using the data to really plot what is the breaking point throughout the process, right from pickup to the lodgement to the airport in the airport runway, and the airport runway inside the airplane. We really run through the whole journey and plot it with raw data to show what is the exposure of the external temperature, what is the potential breaking point, and validate until it's foolproof. So validation, validation, validation. And there's also very important element of it. It's called, sustainability, because they want this product in order to produce a consistent pharmaceutical product, the whole thing needs to be consistent from the material they use to the logistic guide they use, right? So that's why you go through the process. Typically, the process will stick for a few years. The beautiful part for the logistic guys, if I get into this business is for me for like 10 years, right? Because they need that consistency. Similarly, for a factory producing this kind of a drug, you go through this validation process, and then you get a formal cert, right? So this cert is actually sometimes it's issued by the FDA, right? They actually certify only this site can produce this kind of substance. That's why once it's a cert issued, they actually stabilize for quite good some years, right? So another quite a key component is a BCP plan, business continuity plan. Pharma industry is really very, very strict with the BCP plan. So your sourcing, all the alternative for contingency plan is a long established process. That's why people asking me, when the COVID situation in China, it's really becoming very bad. People ask me, do you think the pharma industry will exit China and because of the China is so risky? I tell them it won't happen. Why? Number one, for any of these Chinese factory producing, supplying to global pharma company, they have taken a year-long process to certify it, to validate it, and for them to find a new source, move the things away from China to find a new source, they will take another years to get to the process set up through this validation process, right? That's number one. Number two, part of the BCP plan is really well established. I mean, I have one biological customer, they're producing vaccines. Globally, they have 6 factories, and China has been one of them, and Singapore, there's another one, right? So when the COVID things really hits China, they actually just downsizing the China's production, they move the similar volume to a certified factory in Singapore. So Singapore volume to up. So they don't really have to exit China in order to give them that kind of a contingency, right? So that's a kind of a logic of this API or pharma production logistic flow. So it's all well-established process, right? So it's the BCP has been there for years, right? Also, another people ask me a question, with the COVID situation, will the drug be in a short supply and will the supply chain be, I think it's not going to happen also. I mean, at least in the short term, because this is an industry who never practice the just in time, never, ever, right? This is an industry known for keeping the inventory for 6 to 10 months, right? So of course, let's hope the COVID situation settle and finish from June and we can move on. But if it's really drag on, it potentially can be a little bit problematic, but so far, actually no. Yeah, so far, if you are a diabetic patient, you still get the diabetic drug. And if a patient have a heart problem, then all of this supply is still stable right now, right? So no panic. Okay, on the commercial distribution, a lot of people know healthcare supply chain because the commercial distribution. This is a from factory, they actually sell to the market, move to the wholesaler, and wholesaler move to the pharmacist. Basically, you look at the big container. This is really the moving freight. We call it the sea reefer container. Big containers with compressor in it. So this container itself is a moving freight. A lot of drug in it. A 40-footer, 45-footer. They put it on a ship, and this is how a lot of drug moving across the continent, right? Very interesting. I mean, commercial distribution of drug follow another different set of a requirement. It is called a GDP, Real Good Distribution Practice. This is where anybody who want to get into the pharma distribution business, be it a pharmacist or be it a warehousing operator, you got to have an on-site pharmacist approving each batch. This is all stipulated. Even the IT system, they need to be certified by the regulator. Meaning, if I send out the drug, if there is a recall, I need to have an IT system retrack all my past 12 months, past 24 months delivery, you need to have a way to trace it back, right? So this is all governed under the GDP guidelines. So in order to get into this business in any country, you need to get this GDP license. You have this quality program in place to be in the game, right? There's also a few very interesting topics, and this is where directly related to the patient, right? So how to provide affordable healthcare to patients. It's a global topic. It's really a global challenge, and the supply chains, the wholesalers, the pharmacy, and the wholesale had a lot of room, room to play in order to provide this kind of affordable healthcare, right? And this is becoming a topic of political topic at some times. I give you an example in China where I'm a little bit more familiar. Previously, a pharmaceutical product and maybe X work from factory, the cost may be $10, but reaches the consumers, reaches the retail pharmacies, it is the cost of $50 or $80, 5 or 8 times typically. So what really goes in between, add up, is all the wholesale distribution. So this product will be sold to wholesaler one. Wholesaler one sell probably is a national wholesaler. National wholesaler sell to provincial wholesaler. Provincial wholesaler sell to the city level wholesaler, and city level wholesaler sell to the local pharmacy. Local pharmacy sell to the hospital, and that's how the patient, all the markup added on. So what the government in China did is they actually mandate only 2 invoices. Basically, from manufacturer, you issue 1 invoice, X work, right? So from national wholesaler, you issue another invoice to the hospital. So when you deliver a drug, you have 2 invoices in it. So one is X work invoice, another is a retail invoice. So total transparency, right? So the whole thing needs to be manifest in the system and manifest in the physical invoice accompanied for each delivery of drug. So this approach, I mean, they are actually consolidating. I mean, at this moment in China, there are 3,000 or 4,000 wholesalers. They try to consolidate it into within 100. So really squeeze the whole distribution channels into a consolidated field. And this is really a nationwide thing going on in China, hugely political. And but globally, the pharmaceutical industry is worth around $1,000 billion, $1,200 billion. Out of this, about 90% is actually through wholesaling. But the wholesaling model is increasingly under the challenge. In fact, they add a lot of margin and they become too dominant. I mean, Cardinal Health, ABC, we call the AmeriSource Virgin, the logo there. These are 3 companies, and there are 3 companies controls almost 90% of the US drug wholesaling. And in Asia, Zuli Pharma, DKSH pretty much controls the Southeast Asia's wholesaling. In India, you'll probably go by total different approach. Probably retail pharmacy controls the whole thing. But in China, they are actually the top 10 wholesalers, Sinopharm and all of this, controls about 40%, or close to 40% of the wholesaling market. So I think with the digital telehealth coming in, people are exploring, is there any way that e-commerce could really collect the whole distribution chain into a direct-to-consumer, a direct-to-pharmacy kind of a distribution? Amazon actually set up a company to really aim to disrupt this industry. But so far, I heard they haven't really gone big way yet because of the prescription drug. They haven't figured out a way how to manage the prescription part of the drug distribution, and haven't figured out a way how to really do the revenue split from insurers to insurers to patients and hospitals. But in China, at least I can say, pallet sales and the almost the like Alibaba and JD.com, the pharmacy sales is becoming a really insane. And I can see in a very foreseeable future, there is a second wave of a disruption. There's the e-commerce wave of a disruption of the wholesale distribution in Asia. I think it's really, I see it's almost there, yeah. Okay, this is a kind of a 3 segment. Each segment have a different logic. Each segment have a different challenge, right? How the COVID situation is really impacting healthcare. I think this chart is actually from a study done by a consulting company called Clinics. It's done it probably in the early March time. They actually surveyed all the healthcare distribution guys in the industry and said, basically ask the question, how much you see the impact, you know, of your COVID impacting your distribution and transportation. So 85% basically says, yeah, it's a major impact for my Q1 and Q2 revenue and the throughput. But going from Q3 and Q4 onwards, the industry guys, you know, basically say, hopefully once it dies down and, you know, hopefully we're not that disrupted. So that's kind of the way the industry highlights. Basically, the short-term impact is really big. Short-term impact. Let me give a few examples from my sort of transport logistic perspective. For the cargos, like I say, air cargos from China to Germany, or China to West Coast of US, it's typically during the normal time, it's typically around the $2 to $3 per kilo. Do you know now how much, what's the rate per kilo now for air freight? It's going for $15, $15 to $18. Because of the huge capacity cut. I mean, once they take out the passenger flights all grounded, you are almost taking around 70% of the transportation capacity out of the market. Right, so we call it the typical on the airplane, the upper deck is the passenger seat, lower deck is actually the cargo compartment. Each airplane carries around 20 to 30 tons of cargo in it, you know. So if the passenger flight is grounded, you can see how much capacity is taken away from the market. That's why you see the huge spike in the transport, and that's really hit a lot of this company. This is what we refer to as a short-term impact, right? I mentioned about the impact on the APIs, right? So far, because of the US FDA actually track the global supply around 20 essential drugs. Basically, see if any of these essential drugs sort of impacted so far. So far, I think they only flagged around 1 or 2 products. It's under sort of a risk of a shorter supply, and some of the products like paracetamol, supply is there, but the price is really going up. But in the long term, I would say I still feel the BCP plan of the pharma company should really providing the cushion, but we are still hoping the COVID situation sort of settled in June or July onwards. Otherwise, the situation can become a little bit murky. However, there is a silver lining, and this is something I can share with you. It is actually not in the public information yet. People are always asking, are we going to see a U-shaped return, or L-shaped rebound, or V-shaped rebound? I can tell you, if you look at the current China situation, China is almost over the curve already. Within the transportation logistics space, we see a V-shaped rebound. V-shape, not U-shape. Why I say that? I mentioned about the capacity cut in the month of March, right? at this point in time, there's a huge spike of chartered airplanes and all of it. So the capacity is almost in China. The export of China at this point in time is almost back to the pre-COVID time in a matter of time, in a matter of a month. Right, this is something we see a lot. This probably pulled, the demand is probably pulled because of the China is sending a lot of masks, you know, but there's also a lot of active restocking as well, right? So we hope this China situation is an example that can be replicated when US or Europe lift the ban. In our experience, when you have a stoppage, you will always expect some kind of a surge because of the restocking activities. So we do hope Q3 maybe a Q2, later Q2 and early Q3 can be a very strong rebound from the transportation logistics perspective. And it may take a few extra months to have this number trickle back into the annual report and stock market pricing. So let's stop by the COVID and really what really the long-term trend I see in the industry. So the short term, I think the commercial distribution space needs to do a lot more. And I think China is just one example. In India, if you see a lot of retail pharmacies in it, I think there's a lot of room for further consolidation in the commercial distribution space, a lot of room. I see the direct to patient distribution, direct to pharmacy type of the distribution is going to take place and in an accelerated pace going forward, especially if there is a long-term implication of a COVID. That will be the drive for telehealth, drive for direct to patient care type of transportation and logistic model. It will accelerate. This trend will accelerate. And I see a lot of room for the industry to be further automated. In fact, you see a lot of beautiful manless sort of robots running around in e-commerce warehouse. And I can tell you see it in Alibaba, you see it in Amazon, but within the healthcare logistics space, it's not there yet. And I see a lot of this application of this kind of technology can further automate and this industry and bring the efficiency to the industry and potentially address the lower cost to serve to the patients in the end. So these are really the few, I feel it's a sure thing is going to happen in the industry over the next coming years, right? So that's my last slide. I think I'm on the 35 minutes, so I'm done.
Excellent. There are some questions. First is Harpreet. Harpreet, go ahead.
Hi, Sheng, thanks for the presentation. What is your opinion about the price changes for the pharma products, especially masks and testing kits? Where do you see prices for these products going?
Sheng Jie, one sec. Sheng Jie, one sec. Which batch and which course? Because we would come to know Harpreet. I would request everybody to introduce here.
Thank you. I'm from MBA 2004. I'm based in the Philippines.
Okay. Go ahead, Sheng Jie.
I think I don't really know what the price change you're referring to, because currently the price can be quite subjective, depending on the market and depending on the on where you source it. But okay, I use Singapore as an example. Hiking the price of a mask is illegal. You can really literally get yourself in the jail, right? So this is a situation. I feel if I look at the price quote from China, and actually it's illegal to hike the price of the mask, you know? So I still see at least X work price from China is actually quite stable. And yeah, because of the huge demand on mask, as well as on this the machines associated to the COVID, China is actually more focusing on the quality issues. There's so many people supplying masks, so at some point in time, the quality become a topic. They're actually putting a quite a stringent declaration process, quality control process as a custom to make sure whatever goes out is really properly sort of addressing the concern. From supply side, I don't really see a huge price spike. It's illegal actually.
Nilesh Modi, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Nilesh Modi from MM 2008. My question is on the diagnostic front. So do you think the way the technology is developing rapidly in terms of digital pathology, something we see in histopathology, or in terms of point of care devices, does this mean that the concept of a central lab itself may be challenged? And if so, then will this mean a rethinking of the supply chain model for the diagnostic business as well?
Yeah, you raised actually a very good question. First, there are two things in it. The central laboratory, actually, the concept of central laboratory is more related to clinical trials, the global drug study. It's less related to the normal patient care, the normal diagnostic part. The concept of central laboratory is like this. FDA do not accept any data from any laboratory. It got to be, for any drug study, this central laboratory running all the patient sample testing in one set of SOP, one set of the machine, one set of the reagent into it to ensure the consistency. They run the testing almost like running a factory, right? So they are typically very different from hospital diagnostic lab, right? Hospital, each patient, they run for the patient. The central laboratory is a totally different thing, right? So that's central laboratory part. On the diagnostic part, I think diagnostic is related to prevention rather than cure, right? So currently there's another trend which I didn't mention. In our older father, grandfather generation, they get sick, then they see the patient. Nowadays, in our generation, we talk about annual health checkup. We talk a lot of, these are all the diagnostic, your earlier diagnostic. So I think there is a major shift from treatment to prevention. That's another bigger thing going on in the market. That's why you see in the market, even without COVID, anything to do with the diagnostic reagent, diagnostic kits, diagnostic instrument, they are doing very well, right? Philip, they are known for producing shavers and all of these things. Now they sold out the entire consumer electronic outfit. They sold out. They focusing on what? Diagnostic, hospital diagnostic equipment, all the testing machines, all the MRI machines. That's what they are focusing on right now. So diagnostic is a very big thing. And in fact, I look at some of my customers, the way the diagnostic customers, they really ramp up the volume almost like 40% every year for the past year. That's how they grow.
Any questions? Prof, you want to say something? Prof Domingo?
Hi, Sheng. How are you?
Yes, good, Prof. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you again. Anyway, I have a question. A lot of countries now are feeling the shortages in medical supplies like PPEs, masks, ventilators. So you see a lot of factories trying to build this equipment, this masks, right? Now, after this lockdown, after this pandemic, can we expect two things to happen? First, hospitals will start to hoard these things, right? Build up buffer. Huh? They will increase their inventory. Okay? This may affect price, right? As related to the question earlier. Or another thing can happen. We can have an overproduction of all these things because everybody's building capacity. They're building ventilators. You know, even GM is building ventilators instead of cars, right? Lego is building facial visors, right? Even toy makers are doing this. So what happens after the lockdown? All of this will be an oversupply on one side, or it could be hoarding, right? Because hospitals will become anxious. We don't want a repeat of this people dying because we don't have PPEs, right? So what do you think is the scenario?
I think the scenario, there are two possible and plausible scenario, and in fact the third one may be a combination of the two. The first scenario is there is a discussion that this type of virus will not easily go away. It may be with this community for quite some time. So under this scenario, the PPEs and the mask will be in a constant supply and replenish cycle. So the enhanced demand will continue to draw the inventory from the supply chain. I think that's a scenario one. Scenario two, okay, COVID situation settled by July and August. So yeah, with the sudden drop in demand, you do see a potential glut into it. I do see this quite possible. The third scenario is probably, I would say, you look at the mask, it's become a culture. Previously in Europe, nobody wear mask, even with flu seasons, right? But with this COVID, the awareness of a personal protection, the awareness of a mask wearing is changing a culture in a lot of European countries. So I would say under the scenario number three, yes, the COVID situation may gradually die off, but the culture of wearing the mask will be protected, all of will be also be sort of greatly enhanced. This is in a way also driving the demand of the sustainable demand of the personal protection equipment. Yeah.
So we have three different scenarios.
Yeah, could be.
And this can affect prices, of course, right? Because supply and demand will affect price eventually, right? Either it can go up, it can come down, right?
Right.
Okay.
I can see, in China, so it's if you really hike your price of a mask, you can have a regulator chase after you. So it's become a crime, So
I know. But in terms of demand and supply, once there's scarcity, because this is already post-crisis, right? There's no more crisis, but people will buy things, right? It's like a commodity. It's like metal and corn, and beef, right? They will bid for this. My question is more on the hospital side. Yes. And will this be happening in hospitals also? They will hoard PPEs?
Last question, huh?
Yes. Sorry. Just a follow-up. That's my last question.
I'm sorry, but I will put you on mute now. Otherwise, you might ask.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the inventory will be kept throughout the supply chain, not only hospital. Government will also keep much strengthen the strategic stocking of all of this. So everybody in the chain will start stocking, in fact, enhance the stocking of this PPE. I think it's not only for current COVID, it's for post-COVID as well.
Next, Vikas Sinha.
Hey, Sheng Jie, if you remember, I was in 1994 MBM batch. We were together 1 year apart of each other. And really amazing job done by you guys in FedEx, because last 15 years, I partnered with you guys to do a biological distribution to get rid of the e-commerce completely from middle. And it was an enormous 50-country deal, which we accomplished very, very well. And it still works extremely well. One question about that is, as the biologicals were moving, one of the issues that we continue to face is a counterfeit entering the market, right? How do you see that evolving? Because we put a lot of tracking system to circumvent that, but we continue to see that problem going on. That's number one. The related, which has really caught my attention from this chart which you have on the board is the innovation in the technology and automation. We're moving, the whole world is moving towards gene therapies and cell therapies. That requires cryopreservation. Currently, you know, one patient shipment is costing $2,000. Clinical trial. How do you see this evolving? Because that's not a sustainable model right now, right?
Right. I think on the transportation logistics side, I think plain vanilla transportation from A to B is obsolete, right? So removing the cell-based therapy, removing the protein-based therapy, there's a lot of innovation going on. I see some technology starting to get involved who actually, it's a sensor-based technology who can give it almost real-time geofencing as well as temperature tracking. So technology is already there. I saw some applications where they actually track this, they actually attach the tag on this shipment, and this spot, the shipment is actually haven't moved, but the track moved. So they actually deploy some process to really track things down. So technology-wise, it's there. That's one. Secondly, there's a lot of innovation going on in terms of packaging, the way they package certain things, the way they use special containers. And yeah, I think in this space, it's become a very active space. But overall, when planning out the global distribution of this, we focus a lot on we use a lot of a pharmaceutical type of a quality system. Number one, validation, really validate the packaging, validate the route planning. We talk about route planning, validate everything. And secondly, preventative actions through technologies, using trackers, using device, using GPS, using blockchain, whatever, to really map the chain and track it through and alert it along the lines. So these are the few things which is very, very happening. There's a lot of happening in this space. And I think I can talk to you a lot more if you are interested to explore. Yeah.
Next question from Aladi. It's will the sourcing from China of various pharmaceutical materials shift to other countries?
I think it will. I think it will be hard to ship away from China, but what I see the trend is. And a lot of people are talking about BFAP, the BCP, Business Continuity Plan, right? Their way to do is probably less, you know, move away from China, but they build the contingency somewhere else, contingency plan somewhere else. I think a Japanese company are doing it right now. Actually, they talk about China plus one strategy in Japan. Basically, they have one sourcing in China, they group up another one, right? So I would say that's one way the industry are doing. And secondly, I think it's because of the pharmaceutical nature, because everything needs to be certified, validated, even the production sites, production process, to ship away from China and build up another one. It's
I lost. Hello? Hello? Sheng Jie, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? No, I think your AirPods are.
How the line become really bad.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I go to the next question.
Yeah.
Okay. The question is from Darshan Ganguly. What, in your opinion, are the key bottlenecks to grow the supply chain for pharma in India to be a bigger global player? Does FedEx have plans to use India as a hub base like in Jebel Ali or Singapore? I think Darshan, Sheng Jie has left FedEx, but he can still throw light. Yeah, Sheng Jie.
Yes, I think I left the FedEx already, so I cannot say for FedEx for sure. I think how to move up the address the key. I think India is already doing very well in global pharma supply chain. In fact, India is world #1 exporters of API. Worldwide market share is about 30 something, 34%, if I'm not mistaken. What is lacking is India's pharmaceutical supply chain is very chemical compound. Basically, the brand generic, the generic product, non-branded substance, India is very good. If you look at the global trend, they are moving up to the biological. So the biological supply chain of India is still relatively weak. So this is an area I feel there's a lot of potential in India. I think, yeah, on the bulk pharma side, they are already doing very well, actually.
Okay. Next question is from Malini. What is your opinion on administered prices of essential drugs?
I think with this part, a lot of the government, including India government, using a very strong hand to mandate a certain, well, basically in India, you legalize the copycat drug, you know. So I would say in that part, the drug in India is already quite low. If you look at the China's case, they address the drug price through something called transparency. Remember the 2 invoice I mentioned a while ago? If you have a drug going to a hospital, which shows what is X work price, what is the wholesale price, you essentially know the costs along the chain already. So no one can add 80% margin on top of that. It will become a thing, I tell you. So that's why I think the way that the government in China to do is, #1, collapsing the complex supply chain into simpler one, delayering, and then transparency. Yeah.
Next question is from Rajan. Do you think post-COVID pharma business could attract new places from other industries?
I didn't get attract new what?
I mean, after the post-COVID scenario, will new players from other industries join the pharma business? I mean,
well, I would say pharma business is very hard because it's a lot of research involved. There's a lot of technical know-how in it. But the diagnostic instrument business, medical device business, there's a lot more people are coming in. A while ago, the professor already said that even the GE is actually moving into the production of ventilators. I mean, these are the much lower entry barrier industry. The medical device, instrument, hospital supply, these are the low entry barrier industry, which I think will attract a lot of industry, with a lot of new entrants. But the pharma, you know how it works. If somebody develop a compelling compound, you know, if a small company like Vikas one, you know, develop some therapy, somebody will just buy it, a big pharma will buy you over. So that's how the big pharma build up their entry barrier. So essentially in the pharma industry, very few small guys, there's all big guys, yeah.
the question from Manish Panchal, what is the area of improvement for Indian API industry against China API?
I think it's probably, if I see in terms of a product and R&D, you need to be part of the new trend in terms of the gene therapy, in terms of a customized biological therapy. I think that part of the R&D India is still very weak. I think in China, there is already a cluster of R&D company in this field. I put some logo in it, that WuXi APAC. These are all NASDAQ listed company going really big in the biological APIs. So I think India pharma industry need to move up the value chain through the innovation, and that's one thing. Secondly, I hear in terms of management, I think in the big global healthcare industry, pharma industry, the BCP plan is a lot of stronger than what I see in India. So this is really the way you manage the whole supply chain. I think I hear some of the some of the Indian API company come into the bottleneck on the supplies because of short supply, because supply chain. This is precisely the things a lot of global pharma company, even the China pharma company, has been addressing it for the past decades. Well, when this, I recall when I was in China in the year of 2005, 2004, because of this, they already are building the BCP plant even at that time. So that's why I think in the API industry, I think they need to beef up this part. It's it's not about all the cheaper price, cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. It's about how sustainable, how reliable you can be, how sustainable you are in the long term. I think this part they probably need to address better, I think.
Question from Nishant Gambani. Will the governments globally make it a mandate for all the corporates to invest some part of their profits in healthcare under CSR?
Invest in healthcare, I cannot say for sure because this is so, but invest in the BCP, business continuity plan. It's going to be a really big thing. And you probably see the whole COVID situation brings such a heightened alert. If you are not addressing the sustainability of the business, if you are not addressing this dual sourcing whatsoever, when this crisis hit, you will really get hit. I think the BCP, business continuity plan, is going to be a very big thing. I think a green initiative, the green initiative and that supply chain, all of the moving of these things is not cheap. It actually can be quite expensive, can be environmentally unfriendly in a lot of things. How to build a sustainable green supply chain in the whole thing is another, that's part of the CSR part. This will be actually quite upcoming post-COVID.
Now the last question from Rajan. Do you see greater collaboration among pharma companies like open innovation? What's stopping them from it? Open innovation can bring the price down and sustainable.
I don't really know what open collaboration means. I think a lot of pharma companies are actually quite collaborating. I know a group of R&D people scouting all the new ventures somewhere, they're scouting new compound, new ventures, new opportunity. If there's opportunity, right, they go and buy. There is a lot going on in that space. I know some pharma companies set up separate structure just to address this. Their hunger for new compound, new innovations. I think some of them are even working with a big data company to really speed up all the drug candidate screening. So there's a lot of collaboration going on, even with technology guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Sheng Jie, for a good knowledge session today. In a very simple and a very nice manner, you explained to us the various facets of healthcare logistics, and very well presented also. Thank you so much.
Yes, I think it's really meant to be a sharing, and I want to make it very casual. It's chatting. So I hope what I shared is a little bit useful for you and it's a little bit thought-provoking for you. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions. Yeah.
Well, there is one question from your batchmate, so I think I give him the honor. Mark Ablaza has put in a question. Will Big Pharma now move into in-house logistics, meaning owning their plane, ships, etc.?
Actually, no. The trend is just the opposite. They're more and more, getting out of their own logistic. In fact, they are even get more and more getting out of their own production. They're just focusing on R&D and sell, more like Apple now, the operating model. So that's why you see a lot of contract manufacturers coming out. They call the CRO, Contract Research Organization, CMO, Contract Manufacturing, or they're outsourcing whatever they can. As long as they own the product, they own the brand, they own the patent, and then they own the revenue in the end market. In between, they are ready to outsource everything.